Hi, this is Kate, and this is how I dyed my patent leather Stuart Weitzmans. They were originally tan, and I had actually drawn a mark with a sharpie on the patent heel to see how well I could get a mark out like that. These were the shoes beforehand. They were slightly discolored. What I used was this 100% acetone nail polish to take the deglaze off to get it ready for the dye. And you'll want to take care that you only put this on the parts that you want to dye. Next, I had Kelly Green and Jade dye from Angelus Direct, and I've always wanted a green shoe. I've wanted a bright green emerald shoe forever, and I've never been able to find one in my price range, so this was perfect for me. Now, dye is very fickle. It's very hard. You can see that it runs, and what I'm using is called a wool dauber, and at points I actually had to use a paintbrush to get the dye onto the shoe. But it can be very difficult. There I am using a paintbrush, but it's still very runny. And so what I did was, I knew I wanted to give this shoe a little bit of depth, and I wanted it to be darker, so that's why I used the jade. So here I am using the jade, and when I'm putting it on, you can see that it's really not all that even, that the green dye from the Kelly is kind of sloppy. And what I found is that you can do two things. One, you can put the dyes on in a tandem relationship and then use a dry brush to move the dye around quickly as possible. And the second thing that you can do is you can actually use deglazer to move slightly still wet dye around. And that was more helpful. Unfortunately, I didn't record that for this pair of shoes. However, I did record it for a second pair of shoes that I did an ombre look on, so I did include that clip in this video. But as for right now, this was when I was putting the jade on the shoe to try to get an ombre-like look and get a little bit more depth in my shoe. I would say that the dry brush method also was effective, but I feel like using the deglazer to help move the dye around was very effective as well. And I would try this method out on a pair of shoes that you don't care about first to see how everything works. It can be kind of complicated sometimes. So here I am just dyeing the rest of the shoe. And some parts of the shoe I couldn't dye. There's parts where there was glue, so I had to paint over that with similar colors from the Angelus acrylic line. So this is what I mean if you make a mistake. And forgive my hands again because they look super ugly. But here I've got some deglazer. I just put a little bit on a cotton swab. And right here I've put a lot of blue. These lights aren't the greatest on, I apologize. But I have jade, blue, and purple. And what you do is, because you want more jade, is you just, I'll try to get that, yeah, right there. And you drag this down. And it's just cleaning off some of that extra dye. It's giving it a little bit of a smoother texture. And this way you know this isn't coming off on somebody's skin or anything like that. And then I'm going to take the jade again and go back in. Sometimes I also take a dry brush and I'll go back in. There's just a little bit of dye on this dauber, so I'll go back in with this. And there's a little dye on the purple. And let's see. Then with this brush, just the teeniest amounts of blue. I'm just bringing the teeniest amounts of blue up. So now this is when I've been using the acrylic Angelus leather paint to do the small places in the heel that there were paint, and I also painted the bottom black, and this was the finished product.